Hi everyone, welcome to Psychedelic Science Conference. We are here to witness an historic event. We have, I think, 11,000 people, attendees, coming to learn more about psychedelics and their benefits in therapeutic use. We're here for the next 3 days intensely, speaking to many leaders in the space and bringing you so much more news and updates. So stay tuned. Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of the Psychedelic Conversations. Today I have with me in person, have the privilege and the honor to have Belinda in person at the Psychedelic Science Conference. She is our returning guest and you all have probably seen her first episode with me online. So we'll link it into the show notes so you can catch the first conversation we had. And today I have the honor to be in your presence. Thank you.
Thank you.
Just to give you context, if you're just first time joining us and you don't know about Belinda, Belinda is of Diné Navajo and Ashivi Pueblo of Sunni descent. I'm sorry if I'm not reading it.
No, that's perfect.
She is a wisdom carrier, healer, and the founder of Kalogi, focused on cultural and traditional teaching, inner healing, and an international speaker on various topics impacting Native American communities in the United States. I will add all of the rest of the bio in the show notes. You can connect with Belinda. I think you're a treasure for us all to appreciate what you stand for.
Thank you.
And I love and followed you in this conference. You were really sort of involved and they appreciate what you have to say. Mm-hmm. So for our listeners, please tell us your background, what brings you to the medicine work, and maybe we can take it from there.
Well, the medicine work, it actually began with my own inner healing. Uh-huh. And I saw the healing in my own self and how I could share that with Native American communities and their healing process. Unfortunately, one of the things in the psychedelic renaissance is that there's really not an opportunity for Indigenous voices to be heard. And so I've kind of taken that torch up and, really try to get their voice heard in the communities, whether it's through legislation, whether it's through education, or bringing earth-based teaching wisdoms to medical students or even professionals like therapists and psychologists and psychiatrists. And so that's kind of what I'm involved with right now. And I'm also, since we last talked, I've had training in ketamine and my own ketamine experience as well, and how that really helped me kind of go a little bit deeper, in terms of my inner healing journey. And so, working with practitioners to offer that to some of the Native American individuals who are, voluntarily looking for healing.
That's so wonderful. Thank you for sharing that. I am aware that you're also MDMA trained.
Yes.
You were in one of the trials or the trainings of people of color.
Yes, and that was back in 2018.
Wow.
Yeah, that was the first time that they, MAPS had put together a people of color training course in Kentucky, and there were several. And so this conference is really nice because I've gotten the opportunity to see a lot of my classmates and see what everybody's doing, and it's really wonderful.
Yeah. How do you feel about this cultural, segregation and everything's happening and the trauma that's been caused?
It's interesting. It's normal for Indigenous people to go through that, and we've toughened up our skins. But one of the things that I think is really important, kind of as a person on the other side, is really try to be a bridge builder, really trying to, for example, cultural appropriation, rather than focusing on that, how can we appreciate cultures? And what does that mean? And how do we do that as individual in this psychedelic space? So I talk a lot about that. One of the other things that I really think that is missing from this space is also the conversations around spirituality and how it fits into that healing process. In Western society, we're really taught to kind of exclude that piece of the equation as part of the healing process. But a lot of that is really coming from the way that we're taught in Western, our education systems. We're taught to segregate things. And when we segregate things like biology and psychology, we lose that sacredness in it. They're not interwoven anymore. And so that's one of the things that I try to bring forth in the conversations that I have.
I love what you stand for. So what are the topics that you were involved in? I know you had a storytelling event last night.
Yeah.
If you feel
sure
to share
so the first day on Monday, I was involved with the chaplains, what are formerly known as chaplains. They're the ones that work in hospitals, but there is a new term. They call them spiritual clinicians. And so we're really trying to get them to be aware of psychedelics and how they can be used in that type of setting. And my piece that I was bringing to it was what I just mentioned about spirituality and how that needs to be a part of the equation when we look at healing. In my culture, they say that we have 4 bodies. We have first the spiritual body, we have the physical, the intellect, and the emotional body, And all of those 4 need to be in balance with each other. Yeah. So if one of them is out of kilter, then everything else falls apart, and that's how we end up with illnesses or diseases. So the whole idea from our cultural teachings is that everything needs to be in balance. And I think we talked about this last time, about the word hojon in my culture, where it's balance and harmony. Yeah. And balance and harmony doesn't mean that everything is beautiful all the time. Mm-hmm. We have life that we have to go through where there's ups and downs. And part of the lessons of life is when we're in those down moments, there's always a gift at the end of it. Mm. But we always have this kind of mindset that we always want the beautiful side of things, right?
Yes, yeah. And always keep taking and taking,
yes.
Receiving.
Yes, and so that was Monday. And then on Wednesday, I talked about what are the qualities that are needed for psychedelic practitioners.
Yes.
And one of the things that I shared with the audience was that in Indigenous culture, at least in my culture, let me back up a little bit. When you use English as a way to communicate with your clients or your patients, English is a very noun-based language. Mm-hmm. And so when you use nouns a lot, you actually objectify things. So when we have an individual that comes in with a mental illness like bipolar, we label them. And in Indigenous cultures, they're more verb-based. And so we meet the person where they're at, and it's a cyclical thing, and it's really meeting them where they're at. And so that's kind of what I shared with them. And then I went to kind of the whole piece about what is really the term, what does professional mean? Professional usually means that you take some kind of oath. When a doctor goes in and he gets his medical degree, he has to sign an oath. And I went through the listing of that oath, and one of the things that I did not see on there was do not cause harm. But when you look at social work and you look at other kinds of professional careers, that's what they have on there, like number 1. Yeah. And we're dealing with some very powerful medicines. Yeah. And so I thought that was kind of interesting that piece was missing. And so, just kind of elaborating on those types of qualities that a professional needs. And then, of course, last night I had a storytelling. And the story was really talking about my healing experiences with ayahuasca and my more recent experience with ketamine. That took me on a journey to Spain. So I just returned from that trip about 2 or 3 weeks ago.
Okay.
And it was really dealing and confronting the whole issue around colonialism.
Right.
And actually making a visit to the Chapel of Granada, where King Ferdinand and Queen Isabella's remains are entombed there. And really trying to just go deep and heal that wound that's touched so many Indigenous people's lives, including my family.
Yeah.
And so today I'm kind of on break. And then tomorrow I've got my last
day
talking session.
Yeah. That's so wonderful. And you leading the space and opening as you're talking and bringing this to space to us. Mm-hmm. We're becoming more aware and connected to your story and connected that, walking on these lands, just realizing that it's not just ours. Mm-hmm. There's a whole ancestral lineage and the buried bones of incredible people. And just acknowledging that and knowing that, the energy in this town is incredible, right? Mm-hmm. alone, I can't even imagine Sedona, Arizona, or all the places that, you know, you navigate. Alone, this energy is just off the charts here, and coming together, lots of people of color, people of all walks of life. And yes, we have differences, we have limitations, but ultimately, essence-wise, we want the good, right? And in your communities, are you connected, and are you leading sort of workshops, people that can come in and share spaces and talk about these things that we share?
Yeah, I think one of the more recent conferences that I was involved was about 2 months ago, and that was with Dr. Gabor Mate.
Wonderful.
And that was up in Minnesota with the Anishinaabe people. And the community kind of wanted to get together and talk about intergenerational trauma. So you had young people there, you had, you know, adults, you had some of the elders there. And it was really an eye-opener for them, I think. But it was for many of them, it was making connections with themselves and really understanding the implications of history that we encounter. Yeah. Not only us in this present moment, but our ancestors and the impacts that they have on that. And I think one of the things that was really powerful when Gabor Mate really spoke to some of the issues that exist in our community. For instance, I think about some of the younger people where we have high rates of ADHD, and not realizing that a lot of the source of ADHD could be impact that the mother had, you know, when they were carrying their children, and the implications that go along with that. And so, and then there was also some cultural pieces that were mixed in with that. So I'm, you know, involved with that, you know. And then, you know, one of the things that I've been so busy involving trying to educate others outside of my community, that are really finding that, in a much near future, I'm going to pull back a little bit and really try to get back involved in my own communities and Native American communities, because one of the things that I see missing is that our Native communities don't really understand what psychedelics are about. And so to help them understand that, because there's a lot of missed opportunities. Just recently, the state of Oregon passed the use of psilocybin. And as part of the legislation, they had a seat that was an advisory seat for Indigenous person. And I asked the question, was there outreach to the Native American community to see if they wanted to be involved in that? And they said yes. And it was their version of it was one person that was asked.
Wow.
And so now we're in Colorado here at this MAPS conference, the science conference, and they just recently passed their rules around that. And so my hope is, because I'm also doing work with Naropa University as their program advisor for their psychedelic assisted therapy certification program. So I'm trying to be a little bit more involved and trying to be that bridge builder between the Western science piece and to Native American communities, so they can start understand the value of some of these medicines. And, you know, they may choose or they may not choose to partake in that process, but the door needs to be open to them. And so that's one of the things that I'm going to be focusing on. And so part of that is also building a symposium that would either be a 1-day or 2-day symposium to really give access to either First Nations people in Canada, but also Native American people in this country. And they're here in the United States, there's 574 tribes. In Canada, there's 630 groups, individual groups. And so it impacts a lot of us and a lot of our communities.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And you're in the heart of it. And doing the work. Thank you for that.
Mm-hmm.
I think I mentioned this in our last conversation. The way I found you, I was just Googling MAPS MDMA trials, and then your talk came up. It was one of the most moving talks. I had to listen about your cultural understanding and the implications and what happened in the history. I think this is so incredible times to be able to have this conversation here, and I really feel that, and I really want to support and bring more of these conversations, because I come from an Indigenous background, of course, living and growing up in the UK, similar experiences. But it's almost like the psychedelic medicine is cultivating us in a way that bringing us all together. It doesn't matter where we're from, what land, what walks of life, what spirit. And it's in the heart, like you're in the heart of this, and I really want to appreciate you again. And my question would be, those people who are working with, because again, in my community, we're having these conversations about we shouldn't be serving medicine in a circle where, let's say there are participants of color, because the medicine then brings up different things, different material for them, and they find it very difficult to be in those spaces. So I think we need to bring, not to segregate them. It's not about that. It's about having that sensitivity, maybe more trauma-informed sensitivity to the acknowledgement of like, yes, the medicine is so coherent in delivery. Therefore, when we sit together in a circle, we must be all educated that we will all have different materials coming up for each other. What are your thoughts on that?
I would totally agree with you 100%.
Yeah.
I find that in spaces that where we work with medicine, that usually when you have a mixed community of individuals, there are different things that start to rise up, and it might not be issues that are in the moment. They may be issues that are historically, and those things will come up, and that's just part of this process. And to really honor that space, and primarily the work that I do is with BIPOC communities, Native American communities, because that's my community. And more recently with the use of ketamine and kind of the space that I work with, and the way that I work with that is I do it more in a ceremonial context, because that is the way that our people are. You know, we have ceremony about the way that we prepare the space. And, you know, in our cultures, they say that when we speak of ceremony, it might have been a month ago, but that's when the ceremony begins. And so your preparation to the actual time that you receive the medicine is your preparation for that. And so it's that moment. So it's really behooves you to take the time to really humble yourself. What are your true intentions? A lot of times when we go into these psychedelic spaces, we tell them the day or the day of that they're going to, or the hour of that they're going to take the medicine, have an intention. When you really think about intentions, intention should be really a long-lasting piece, because when you go through the experience and you do the integration, that should be the longer piece that you're working towards, right?
Yeah. It's like very much the inception of the idea of wanting to become, participate in a ceremony. I've heard this as well before. That's when the medicine starts actually working with you. It activates you in some level energetically.
Yeah. And I think more so with some of the more, the plant medicines. They call them plant-based earth medicines because they're rooted in the earth. And I find like with ayahuasca and some of these other plant medicines, when you partake in that medicine, it always feels like there's a guardian or protector with you traveling through your experience, right? With ketamine, it's not like that. It's synthetically made. I refer to ketamine as the catalyst, because when you take it, it just keeps moving, and you don't have that ability to stand back and witness what's happening in front of you. You know, the reliving the trauma, it just keeps moving with you.
Wow.
And the other thing is, for me at least, my own personal experiences, I didn't feel that presence of like a grandmother or somebody that was there walking with me. Yeah. And so when the fear started to settle in, I had just myself to rely on.
How did that make you feel?
At one point, to be honest with you, and I shared this in my story, it was frightening. And at one point, I thought I was going crazy. Right. Because at one point, I shared in my story last night that at one point, I literally thought I was going crazy. And then my mental mind started trying to rationalize that. Like, what am I going to tell my parents? And then I kind of paused for a minute. And then I said, what the hell? I'm just going to go with it. I'm going to surrender to whatever it has to show me and just go with it. And what it ended up showing me was it took me to a place that was in Spain, which was the reason why I turned 60 this year. And it was part of my healing journey. I ended up floating at the top of a roof of a cathedral, just looking down. And I remember, because I took an art history class, an architect class, when I was going to grad school or undergraduate, and I could remember all the images that were in that building. And so after about a month later, I was integrating from my ketamine experience, and I started going on the internet and looking through the photos and stuff, and I found it. And what it was the chapel of Granada, and it was where King Ferdinand of Aragon II was, as well as Queen Isabella, and they were the ones that were part of the Inquisition. They were instigators as well of the doctrine of discovery, which shattered many of our communities, and to really make peace with that. And I'll tell you that sitting in front of this tomb was a very powerful experience for me, and to really make peace, to help heal not only my generation, but my ancestors' generations. That was very moving, and as I was walking to this chapel, I called in all of the Indigenous elders and Indigenous ancestors from all over the globe. And I said, if you want to come and sit with them, this is your opportunity. Because I'm here in the physical form. And this is how powerful these medicines can be to really heal that wound within us, right? And to sit before them and to be a part of that healing process was just phenomenal. And there's so much more of that story that can go on, but that's the gist of it. But when we really look at that, it's an opportunity for us to really heal a lot of those wounds that we carry of our ancestors, no matter where we come from. Because at the end of the day, we were all colonized.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah. We all carry the indigenous spirit inside of us. Yeah. Thank you.
You're welcome. Welcome. It's such a learning process, this using these medicines. It really, one of the things that I've learned as I start to get older is it helps us to unlearn things that we've learned and relearn new things and be open to that. And I really am mindful of the things that I choose to engage in versus those things that will be a waste of my time and the benefits that it offers me, but also my community. And I think that's the way we should all look at things.
I think so. I agree with you. And then you become the powerful medicine, walking medicine yourself. And then you touch. I mean, even in your presence, I always felt that. Online, I felt that as well. I think there is something very powerful happens to us when we unlock that thing. That is so infectious. People feel it. You start speaking and there's always this energy behind it. It's so coherent. Yeah.
One of the things I also, in this psychedelic space, because there's this integration between the indigenous parts and then also the modern science. And I was thinking about this the other day, is like, how do we merge these together so that we become partners rather than being adversaries to one another? And there's a model called the Causal layered analysis, and it really looks at these different layers and how, if you look at indigenous communities, they're based on values, they're based on different types of ways of thinking. Whereas if you look at the Western kind of mindset, it's really about data and what are the problems. And so we just deal, in Western mindset, we just deal with the surface stuff, right? And in the bottom level, we look at those things that are going to be sustainable. And to me, that's the gift that we can have if we work together. We look at something that's more long-term and that's foundational, that's going to benefit all of our communities, And I think one of the other things is really bringing community back.
Yeah, always about the community. I love that. Somebody in our circle of podcast guests, speakers, said community is integration.
Yeah.
He said community is the integration. Once you have your community, you don't need to worry about integration checklists. And I really love that.
Yeah, I think that is so true.
Yeah.
And speaking of integrations, I think that some of these medicines, you can have a short duration of integration. For something like ketamine, it has to be longer because the processes that you go through might take months, 1 or 2, 3 months. Unpack and then start processing that. And if we're only doing integration the week after we do a session with them, that's not going to help them. And so we need to be mindful as practitioners to keep that in mind as we work with people.
Yeah, thank you for speaking to that. It always comes back to the long-term devotion and commitment to this process.
One of the things I also wanted to share while I have it on my mind is that over the last 2 or 3 years, as I've been going out and speaking to medical students in the conferences like this, I always get 1 or 2 psychologists or psychiatrists or even therapists come up to me, and they'll, have a client that has taken too much medicine. And it's totally like blown them out. Their soul, in our culture, we talk about soul wounding where their soul gets fragmented.
Right.
And a lot of times those professional people don't know how to help them. Mm-hmm. And so they're asking me, how do we help them, And so we need to think about these medicines in the way that we work with them. They're all energy. And if we're uncomfortable having those kinds of conversations about energy and how that works, this is probably not the medicine for you to be working with.
Best advice I ever heard right now.
Yeah.
See, everybody talks about, psychedelic medicines are not for everyone. But what does it look like, practical terms? This is exactly what you said. Mm-hmm. If you're uncomfortable going places and talking and having these conversations around energy or connecting with the body and listening and all those things, it's almost like we've trained not to go there. Mm-hmm. The whole lifestyle and the way we live our lives is just kind of programmed to not go there.
Yeah. And I think that's part of the formal education that a lot of medical and professional people inherit. I mean, I was trained that way too, but I went back to my traditional teachings, which is completely opposite of that.
And rediscover it.
You really experience it and really honor it, in that way.
So do you think, just one last question. So do you think, actually I have 2, but I don't mind. The other one is, so you said to bring back this medicine to your people, like your tribe and your communities. Is it because they already had this medicine in the past, they lost contact? Or how does it work?
Well, I was just listening to an elder just a few minutes ago before I came on this podcast. And one of the things that he was sharing, if you think about the boundaries that had been created in different countries and maybe yours, the whole United States that used to be all of North America, there was trade between, Central America, South America, to what we know as the United States and Canada. And as Indigenous people, we traded with each other. Right. So the medicines have been in existence in a lot of our communities before colonialism. And so a lot of when colonialism happened and Christianity came into a lot of our communities, that was the first thing that they severed from that. And I know on my father's people, there were other medicines that they used that were not talked about, things like datura, and because those were very sacred medicines and only certain individuals within the community were allowed to use it. And it's interesting because I'm hearing more of those kinds of things where people are starting to explore those again. And it's also a medicine that's very powerful. If you take too much, you can, it's very toxic.
Right.
And so you need to know what you're doing. And so I think that's the other part of this conversation is, really understanding the potency of these medicines.
Absolutely. Again, if it all comes down to apprenticeship, I love the word apprenticeship, being an apprentice to the mentor that knows how to work with these medicines so you can learn. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think we need to bring that back as well. It's not a textbook learning. This is not that.
No.
Something else.
I was sharing with a group on that professional practitioner panel that I was on is that in our cultures, there's a formal way of being initiated into these medicine societies or medicine groups, and you might spend a lifetime learning a certain type of practice, and it's not that you can go down to Peru and spend a month down there and do a retreat and then come back and put up your little sign saying you're a shaman. That's not the way that it works.
No,
because there's so much that you need to understand that supports that medicine.
Yeah. Yeah, the field experience of being an apprentice, I think is so valuable.
Yeah, absolutely.
I followed Caroline Myss for a while, like when in the beginning of my first spiritual trying to find a direction. And she's very abrasive, as you know. And she said, one lecture just still left a mark on me. She says, back in the day, you weren't even allowed to ask the question, who am I? Till you go through years of apprenticeship under a, let's say she was from Catholic background, under a nun, like a seasoned nun. You would have to shadow and follow her around till you're ready. You're not allowed to ask this question. Now it's like everywhere. It's more superficial, more like Instagram version of like spirituality.
Right.
And it stuck with me, left mark, and I really see the value of it now, especially when things get mainstream too quickly, too soon.
And I think you bring up a very important point that religion is different from spirituality. They're not one and the same thing. The way that I look at religion, it's organized religion. It's man-made law that tells you the way to live your life.
Yeah.
Whereas spirituality is something, it's your walk in your daily life.
Devotion.
And the way that you exist and carry yourself. There's a big difference.
Massive distinction between the two.
Yeah.
Okay, my last question. Ketamine, you said with ayahuasca, it almost feels like there is someone guiding, protecting. So with ketamine, would you say that if we still approach, by the way, I call everything medicine. MDMA is a medicine. LSD for me is a medicine. I have an older son and he's like, Mom, you must be the only person calling LSD medicine. It doesn't matter because it's about the ritual. So I was going to ask you before I say that, would you say that if we change the way we approach it, if we bring more ritual to it, more respect, it could still deliver exactly what you need?
Yeah. It's, it goes back to what I was making with regards to the point around energy. We can, when you think about physics and its fundamentals, we can't create energy. Energy can transform. So we can transform water into something that's solid and ice, and that is the way energy moves. That's just the way of natural order of things. And so when your intentions and when you take the medicine, the manner in which you show reverence of it, or even the way that you harvest it from the earth, and you make sure that you give something back, that's part of that sacred reciprocity piece. In Western culture, where we think about cradle to grave when we create something, we're a very wasteful society. And what we really need to come back to is cradle to cradle. So we use, and in many of our indigenous cultures, we use everything. And what we don't use, we give back to the earth so that it can rejuvenate and recreate more. And, if we come from that type of mindset, I don't think there would be a big issue with regards to commodification of a lot of these medicines. We worry, in my culture, we worry a lot about the existence of peyote in the future. So everybody shifts and they're going down to ibogaine. I start to worry about that too, so what is going to be left for our children and our grandchildren? We need to be thinking ahead, not just about our own needs in this moment, and so it goes back to a lot of those types of teachings.
I love that. And I love your way of like offering. You told me a story about something very precious that you said when you were training for, I think it was the MDMA, you took everyone out to the nature and offering. That was like the most profound story, which is so simple. We don't often think about, right? And tell us about that, and before we close the conversation.
So this is the MAPS MDMA People of Color training in Kentucky, and we were probably about middle of the week of our training, and things started to disconnect. It was, there was not the synergy anymore. And one of the things that happened, I asked the question, has anybody ever done ceremony to honor these medicines? The sassafras, it's where MDMA's its original source was from. And they said no. And so we all took a break in the middle of the week, and I went out and we met a dear brother that took us out into the forest, and we harvested. I went to go into the forest and look for the medicine, and a couple of my classmates, there was a East Indian lady, and there was a Japanese American that came with us, and there was 2 other people that came with us. And I wanted them to be there for the purpose of being a witness, you know, so that they could see what it was that I did. And I said, no filming, no taking pictures. So we went out into the forest and harvested a little branch. But before I did that, I offered a prayer. And I also apologized to the plant that they've been using MDMA, misusing MDMA for a long time. You hear about Molly and you hear about its reference to as a drug. That's not honoring the medicine. And so I apologize on behalf of society that we're really wanting to use this medicine in a way that really heals people, heals humanity. And came back and I brought a little leaf and a branch and put it in the middle of the room. And all of the people that were there offered something into that altar. So something that started out as a small little altar in the middle of the room, by the time we got done with the training, was like filling up the whole floor of the room. And everybody offered from their culture a different piece to that altar. And that is the way we should all be doing things.
I love that.
Yeah.
Such a powerful story. Yeah. And I like how you saw everything was disintegrating and disconnecting, and suddenly we need to bring this back with prayer and ritual.
Yeah, you can. I can sense when there's chaos and misalignment and everything.
I love that.
So that's the way. And when you do that, it makes it easier for the person to go through their journey.
Yeah,
with a better outcome. Not a good outcome. They might still have to do some work, but
still,
it helps. You know, the process.
Yeah, it's creating that space and that container.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
Oh, you're so
welcome.
All
the wisdom. My God.
Thank you, Susan.
These conversations are so psychedelic. It's like you don't need medicine.
No, you don't.
Before we let you go, please tell us your upcoming projects,
sure,
offerings for our listeners that would love to connect with you.
Well, one of my projects that I'll be working on probably the next month or 2 is putting together a symposium or consortium for Native American people to really help them understand what psychedelics are about. Yeah. I will still continue to do work and make offerings to Native American people to do their own healing. And that's just, you know, I work with a therapist, and I want to be able to, right now in the Phoenix area, but I want to be able to offer that in other communities. Yeah. Look for a practitioner that is able to do the scribing for ketamine, but also train individuals within those communities to be a resource for the bigger collective in their area. So that's something I'm working on. I'm also working on my book, finally.
Congratulations.
That's a lot of work and finding time to just write. And part of the story that I shared last night at the MAPS storytelling event is one of the chapters that I will be writing in my book. And this book is really about all of my spiritual and healing experiences. I was at the age of 12 years old.
Wow.
Yes, so look forward to that.
We'll look forward to that.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much. I love having you back all the time. I'm sure I'll be stalking you and asking you to come back wherever.
You're right. That's right.
So I'll be, messaging you and following you, and look forward to what comes up.
Yes, and I look forward to having conversations around this, and the more that we can all understand it, it doesn't matter what continent we are on. We all have trauma, and we all need to walk in this way because we're all connected.
Yeah, so beautiful. And when I return to UK, hopefully in divine timing, we'll host you in the UK.
Yeah, that would be wonderful. That would be wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Hope you guys enjoyed this. Please do get in touch with Belinda. We'll have all the contacts and the links, and then don't forget to share in the comments. Don't be shy. I'll see you guys on the next one. Bye for now.